All right. So, to refresh your memory on why you're here today, we are going to learn from an amazing industry expert. In the book publishing world, there's actually two types of book ideas. There's the book that you desire to write, and the other one is actually the book the publisher will purchase. These may not be the same book. To secure a publishing agreement, you must understand what publishers seek and how to differentiate your book. In today's session, Randy's going to provide invaluable insight on attracting agents and publishers to offer you a contract. She's going to cover a ton of topics, including what topics for books are hot and what's not. She's going to talk about the most essential sales tool you need in order to sell a manuscript to a publisher. She's going to talk about the quickest way to get an agent or a publisher to stop in their tracks. And she's going to talk about the number one thing to absolutely not do if you are serious about getting a publishing contract. And she's going to cover a ton more besides those points.
Yep.
Randy Peyser is the founder of AuthorOneStop.com. She edits books, ghostwrites books, and helps people get their book deals with New York publishers. She works primarily with first-time authors. Her authors' books have been featured in Oprah Magazine and Time Magazine and on the Wall Street Journal and the USA Today bestseller lists. They've also been on Hallmark TV, in airport bookstores, in big box stores, and optioned for Hollywood films. Randy is actually the author of the Write a Book program, Crappy to Happy, as featured in the movie Eat, Pray, Love, and The Power of Miracle Thinking. Please give a warm LeadHERship welcome to Randy Peyser.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I want to jump in by just saying in the last 2 months alone, I'm just talking about in the last 2 months. Well, 2 weeks ago, I sold a transgender novel directly to a publisher in Canada. I sold a book on long-term customer retention. I sold a book on AI for business. I sold a book on the future of work. I sold an autism caregiver's book. Let's see, what am I forgetting? I think that's what I've sold just in the last 2 months. Oh, and I had an Oracle deck come out for 2 women from the Métis tribe in Canada. And I sold a book on conscious living. There. Okay, now I got them all. And that's just in the last 2 months. So I have a very, very strong idea as to what agents look for and what publishers buy. And I pitch all year long. And this is my joy. It's my fun. And so I want to share some PowerPoint slides of images of books and talk about why these books sold. And I'm also going to talk about like the difference between self-publishing, traditional publishing. I like them both for different reasons. When I do a discovery call with someone, the only thing I want for anyone is what is highest and best for them. I'm not attached to whether someone works with me or doesn't. The only thing I want is what's highest and best for each person and their project, depending on their goals. And I always speak with people with absolutely no agenda outside of what is highest and best for you. So that's where I want to start. Let me just pull up the screen and come on, here we go. So let me get to slideshow beginning. From beginning. So as Colleen was just saying, you can all see this, yes? We're all good? Okay, good. So Colleen was saying, there's me. I just realized wearing the same outfit I'm wearing today. Speaking to 250 women at a conference in West Hollywood. And I'm saying, there is the book you want to write and the book a publisher will buy. Are they the same book? So this is me years ago in the 90s pursuing my dream with my first book. I'm standing off the 101 freeway in Mill Valley, California at rush hour outside of San Francisco and across the Golden Gate Bridge. And I am pursuing my dream because nothing is going to stop me from getting a book deal. And some lady driving by gave me $3. So a publisher called me that night. Speaking of guerrilla marketing, right? A publisher called me that night, but he was the publisher of a national magazine. I had already been in the magazine world. I had been running a very large mind, body, spirit magazine in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so they say, be careful what you ask for. So my sign says, author seeks publisher. It did not read author seeks publisher for her book. Be very clear on your intentions and how you verbalize them. But I did become editor in chief of his national magazine because what the hey, being editor in chief of a national magazine was bringing me closer to getting my book deal. This is back in the 90s. So this is Book Expo America, the feeding frenzy for the publishing industry in the United States. So I went to this show for almost 20 years, every single year with all my appointments set in advance to meet with agents, meet with publishers. The last time the Book Expo happened was pre-pandemic, and I had 25 meetings in 2.5 days, pitching 16 projects, meeting with 22 publishers and 3 with top literary agents. I want to give you an idea of the playing field. And it's my job to get my people's projects to the top beyond all of this. This is an idea of what the show floor looked like. This giant book expo, which truly was the feeding frenzy in the United States for the entire publishing industry, happened every single May, usually around Memorial Day. It went out with the pandemic. It hasn't come back. And so the good news for me is that I have 20 years of first name connections, real relationships in place with people where I would make all my appointments, go to all the various booths on behalf of my people and get hugs, because these are real relationships that I have. It's not just a name or random wishing, hoping, and praying when I'm pitching anything to anyone. But every publisher buys for their own shelf, so it's my business to know what publishers publish on their shelves. So when I was writing my first book, Crappy to Happy, there was so much joy in the process. So I ask you, is there joy in the process of what you're doing? Because what I said to myself is, that which is seated in joy can only result in joy. So whatever you're doing in your business, is it joyful? I have a challenge. So I have a challenge for everyone that I speak with or to. And I've given over 500 talks already on how to get a book deal with a publisher. And this is my challenge to you. When you're writing nonfiction, and I'm going to assume most people in your network are writing nonfiction because you are professionals doing what you do. And so my challenge is, when you read nonfiction, you'll often see like a quote, especially at the top of a chapter, or it's very common, or at the end of a chapter. So this is my challenge to you. You be the person that other people quote. You be the person that other people create memes off of. You are here to deliver your message, to make your impact. So let it be your voice that's heard. So the way you can do this is like when you're going through what you've written in a chapter, for example, pull out a quote. It's called a pull quote. You've already written it. Let your brilliance shine. Let your brilliance be known. So, for example, I just showed you an example. That which is seated in joy can only result in joy. That's one of mine. So, that's just, I think, a really, really powerful point in moving your message forward, because we're all here to make the impact we're here to make. So here, I have a secret that I want to share. And I've given over, like I said, 500 talks, and not one conference or summit where I've keynoted or whatever. No one has ever addressed this topic that I address. And it has to do with fear, because all of us have a certain level that we get to where we're comfortable approaching media or going for the dream of a book or whatever it is. Wherever we have a ceiling of fear, it's like, I'm willing to go up to here, but I'm not going to take that extra step. And I want to share with you how I overcame this in the book world. So at the first year I went to the Book Expo, I was with a very dear friend of mine, Jill Lublin, who's a national publicity strategist. And at that time, in the early 90s, or mid 90s, we both had our first books, and we're looking for publishers. And so this is Jill. I'm going to just kind of physically demonstrate. We're walking along, and everybody has a name tag, and she goes, CNN. She's lunging after that. And this is me, CNN, and I'm following. And then we make the connections, we move on. We're walking along a little way further, and she goes, USA Today. And she's like lunging, and I'm going, USA Today. And I realized I had what I call the hiccup of hesitation. And wherever we hold these hiccups, it doesn't mean we can't get to our dream, but it is going to take longer because we have these little hiccups. So notice, are you already comfortable? Let's say, if you have a book that's going to be coming out, are you comfortable going after media? Are you comfortable being that front person and, talking with reporters or getting interviews or, whatever? And so I knew that I wanted to overcome that hiccup of hesitation in that moment because I was really going for my dream, but I was scared. I will admit it. I had that hiccup of hesitation. So I decided I would physically model my friend Jill on the show floor. So we're walking along, and all of a sudden I went, "Ladies' Home Journal." I lunged. So what I tell myself, and if this is something that is valuable for you, what I told myself in that moment, or whenever I have hiccups of hesitation, I say, "Go, go, go." And so I hope that's a gift to anyone who needs to hear that message. It doesn't mean you can't have your dream, but it will take longer to get there. So what story do you want to tell? Is everybody here writing business? I'd love to know, are you writing, like some people are writing memoir, they've been through difficult experiences, they've overcome something, and they want to empower other people, by, sharing their experience and how they got through it? Or are you writing something related to your profession? And Colleen, I would love for you to share from the chat, so I'm not like getting all, squirrely trying to figure out what people are saying. Let me know, what are you writing, if you are writing, or if you're not writing, what would you like to be writing?
Yes, I just dropped it in the chat, and exact perfect point to break, because that's that hiccup of hesitation. We as women sometimes have a difficult time talking about this. So I'm encouraging you. We've got a small room. The chat will not be shared in the recording. So you can be brave, overcome that hiccup. If you're working on a book idea, I would love to hear, and I know Randy would love to hear, what are you writing about?
Yeah,
Drop it in the chat and let us see.
You don't even have to be that specific. I would just like to know, like, the genre: business, memoir, or self-help. So anyway, I guess while people are doing that, I'll just move on.
Yeah, and we've got a few comments. Children's book about manners. There's a book about a combination of business and personal stories. Love that. That was Kathy, and the other one was Elise. Thank you, ladies, for that input.
Okay, so my connection with children's books, I don't handle children's books personally anymore, but my connection does, and I'm going to tell you who my connection is. So she takes children's books and she converts them to scripts because she was responsible for SpongeBob and CoComelon. so anybody who wants to see a children's book or a children's book idea, go to film. And I believe she also works with children's books herself. I stopped working with them many years ago because I was in New York and I was pitching children's books, and I wasn't getting enough traction. I wasn't selling. So I figured, not my lane. My lane is to help, people who are writing books for, professionals, for adults, and, some YA, but mostly professionals for adults, whether it's, self-help or memoir or things like that. Okay, so that gives me an idea of, what people are writing about. Good. Number one most common major mistake that I see is for people who want a traditional book deal is to self-publish first. Now, I'm not talking about Kathy and an anthology style program at all. I'm talking about people who have just chosen to self-publish a book on their own. Because the problem is, once you do that, you have a track record of sales. And if your sales numbers aren't where a publisher or agent would want them to be for your first book, they're not going to pick up that book, and they're not going to pick up your next book, because we'd have to prove sales. And there are ways that we do that. Some people do GoFundMe programs, but we have to prove sales, because it's just, I have sold self-published books before, but it is tough. It's so much easier for me to sell a book for a first-time author who has no track record of sales than someone who has a low track record of sales. And later on, I'm going to talk about the numbers that publishers look for. Okay, when I'm pitching something, I'm always looking like, what is the unique angle? I had a whistleblower book related to Hurricane Katrina and the fault of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And it had a really broad title. So I started thumbing through the book and I saw where the author made the statement, beware of words whispered in water. I said, oh my God, there's your title. So this became a Publishers Weekly top pick. It's won 7 major awards. It could have won even more by now. And when I pitched it, I'm always looking like, what's the unique angle? And I pitched her as the new Erin Brockovich. And she created a Levees Museum in New Orleans. I mean, so, and she's also like, this is something that can happen with the book because it was hurricane related. She is the go-to person for Associated Press with all things hurricane. So there were hurricanes recently in the US, and she got a lot more media coverage, and it's constant. She is like the go-to expert. You can become a go-to expert if you, get this, own a lane. What lane do you own? So, for example, when I'm pitching nonfiction, every nonfiction project requires a book proposal, which is a business plan in which we're proving the sale of your book in different categories. And so if I can start that business plan by saying, you're filling in your title, is the first book too, then you own a lane. And that's very, very powerful positioning. So, like when I'm speaking with authors individually and somebody tells me they're writing a book about this, but I want them to own a lane, and maybe they don't own a lane because too many people are already commenting on that, but can we move it a little bit? Can we tweak it? And I'll give you an idea. Some years ago, Marcy Shimoff had come out with a book. She's in The Secret. She's like, the top-selling female author of all times because she worked on the Chicken Soup for the Soul books that she's associated with. And she's also a personal friend. But anyway, so she had come out with Happy for No Reason, instant New York Times bestseller. And I was in New York pitching a book related to happiness. And I'm hearing, no. I'm going, I got to do something. Came across an agent who said, why don't you call this a book about liberating yourself from fear? Same book, different positioning. I'm in New York and I'm pitching and I'm hearing, yes. So, the positioning really, really matters. And, I love helping people figure out, like, what is the positioning based on your subject matter? Timely. How timely is your topic? The Prepared Investor, how to prevent the next crisis from affecting your financial independence. Yes. I mean, everybody understands, the timing of this. How timely is your subject matter? Like when I was mentioning, I sold a transgender novel just 2 weeks ago. Well, timely. The Chiron Effect. This is a mind, body, spirit book that paired core wounds, which was like psychology, with mind, body, spirit topics of astrology and empathy. So I sold this book, I think like 2 or 3 years ago, and the publishers sold foreign rights in China, and just last month sold foreign rights in Romania, which was very, very cool. The Tao of Influence. This woman owns a lane. This woman did a TED Talk prior to this book. She got 1 million views on YouTube. So we were able to show absolutely strong engagement. 2 weeks after we finished the editing of it, this book was sold. It was on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list for 7 weeks as best hardcover business book. So with business books, I sell a lot of business books, and it's very typical for me to get multiple offers from publishers on books. Weeks ago, we had 3 or 4 publishers interested, 2 who offered contracts. So, I mean, those are, I sell a lot of those. And based on content alone, I'm just going to tell you the kind of nonfiction books that's easiest to sell to publishers, business, as long as you own a lane. So this is a book we edited for Gifts of the Highly Sensitive. And the woman was at the Maui Writers Conference, and she won their big deal and their workshop, whatever contest they had going. And Hay House, being the largest publisher of mind, body, spirit books in the world, gave her the contract. And I do pitch directly to Hay House and many mind, body, spirit publishers anyway. 6-figure deal, pivot. So huge publicity platform, leads to six-figure deals. This was a bidding war between three publishers, and Simon and Schuster took the book. Power Your Profits by Susie Carter, another six-figure deal. This one was fun. I had pitched this to various publishers, and McGraw-Hill came in at $17,500 advance. Then Simon and Schuster came in, and as soon as I had two big houses like that, two big players, I'm thinking bidding war. And so I contacted one of the agents who I pitched to, and I pitched her by email, but I didn't write an email. I wrote a subject line which read, "Linda, can you conduct this bidding war?" Linda, the agent, called me within 10 minutes. The next thing you know, we had 12 publishers, and it sold for $125,000 to Simon and Schuster. And then Cosmo magazine called it number 17 best nonfiction book 2020. Very cool. So there's a big buzzword in the publishing industry. This was my crappy to happy book that Julie Roberts holds up in the movie Eat, Pray, Love, years after it came out. It was in the movie. So I want to share with you the biggest buzzword in the publishing industry right now, and you all need to know this if you're writing nonfiction. And it's called, this is what they tell me, and I'm going to define it. They say they're looking for outcome-driven titles, outcome-driven content. The McGraw-Hill Acquisitions editor explained this to me. She defined it. She said, I'm looking for books that'll take readers from point A to point C, so by the time they finish reading the book, they can actually apply something and do something differently. She goes, I'm not looking for like the big picture overview, broad view kind of books. So practical steps are really, really important. Even for the person earlier who mentioned that, they're telling personal stories mixed with business, make sure you have a lot of practical steps in there and separate them out. Don't expect readers to extrapolate your steps. So I tell people, if you're writing memoir or any form of like a prescriptive memoir, which is often what the category falls into when people are writing about, here's business stuff and here's my personal experience. Bring in other people's experiences as well if you can. And if you're going to do something that has like story followed by steps, this is what I highly recommend, that your steps, that you're consistent. If you're doing like 3 or 4 steps, make sure there's 3 steps for every chapter or 4 steps for every chapter. Make them consistent in terms of, or relatively consistent in terms of word length. So there's just consistency. For example, in Crappy to Happy, following each of my stories are 4 steps to happiness now. And so my original title for Crappy to Happy was From Crappy to Happy, and then my subtitle was A Journey Out of the Pits and Into the Fruit of Life. So the publisher takes off the from, it becomes Crappy to Happy, but look what they did with my subtitle, Small Steps to Big Happiness Now, which answers the question in the reader's mind, which is, what's in it for me? So there are 4 steps to happiness now after every story. And these are how I suggest, if you're doing something with steps, that you write them. Either insights based on your story or action steps. Insights or action steps. And I think it's important that you write that down so you remember it, if this is important information for you. Insights or action steps. My second book was The Power of Miracle Thinking. Here's all these, miracle stories that people had. I wanted to know, what are the thoughts and attitudes that they held, the beliefs that they held, plus the actions they took that allowed the miracles to unfold. So following every single story, there's short stories in that book, like 3 or 4 pages, maybe not more than 5 pages. There's 3 miracle thinking tips following each story. So think about all of the stories in your book and what do they relate to. That will answer the question in the reader's mind, which is, what's in it for me? So Take Back Your Life. Wendy Ida sold a gazillion copies of this book and wound up speaking on conference stages, even for Verizon and Google. But look at her book title, Take Back Your Life. You wouldn't even figure that she would wind up in places like that, but she absolutely did. Now, in terms of outcome, look at her subtitle. My no-nonsense approach to health, fitness, and looking good naked. What do women want? Look good naked. She sold so many copies of this book, and then we worked with her last year on her second book as well. And, it was funny, though, because the publisher I found for her, they came back to her and they wanted her to do a second book, and she goes, Randy, why should I? This book is going gangbusters. I don't need to do a second book. So she waited many years actually before, we worked on the second book for her. Prescriptive memoir, as I just mentioned, Your Story Well Told. This is by one of the big names on the Moth Storytelling Hour through NPR out of San Francisco. He wrote this book. Prescriptive memoir is telling stories from his life, but followed, as I mentioned, by steps that people can follow. Second most common major mistake if people want a traditional publisher: no pie in the sky. What I mean by that, in the book proposal, as I mentioned earlier, which is a business plan in which we're proving the sale of a book in various categories, people will say, when I do such and such, when the book comes out, I will do such and such. No, publishers want commitments. Like, if somebody says, I'm going to approach XYZ people for endorsements for my book, get committed endorsers first. In the proposal, even if they haven't written an endorsement, you can at least say committed endorsers include. When the book comes out, I know somebody who knows Oprah. Not a commitment. So they're not interested. Like, I saw a proposal that came into me a couple of days ago. I could reach out to, and they list all these people. It's like, reach out to them now. Get commitments in place. Do what you can to actually solidify whatever it is, because pie in the sky does not fly. Never tell a publisher, I know my book is going to be a bestseller. You don't know that. And they will roll their eyes. They'll say, oh, amateur, and they'll move on. So commitments, strong commitments matter. So this book, Adrenaline Nation, was featured in airport bookstores. It was so fun. I was in the San Jose, California Hudson booksellers, waiting for a flight. And there's Adrenaline Nation front and center, which was so fun. But it was a tough sell, and I'm going to tell you why. If your book crosses into different markets, it's a much tougher sell. So, his subject line, subheader, chronic stress, ruining our health and bankrupting our economy. So it goes back to the Barnes & Noble book buyers, because the Barnes & Noble book buyers only buy for their own shelves. Does this belong on a health shelf, or does it belong on a business shelf? So it took a long time to get this. It took over 2 years to get this book sold. I secured an agent for it really quickly, but it took, like I said, 2 years to get it actually sold. But it did wind up in airport bookstores, which was certainly fun. And so did Pivot, an earlier one that I showed. So in Cosmo magazine, it was so funny, like publishers like fast. And so my original title for this book was Grab and Go Stress Relief. The author loved it. She was creating a whole branded series around it, but publishers have the say on what a title's going to be. And they chose 5 minutes to stress relief. Pros and cons of self-publishing versus traditional publishing, and what is right for you. Like I said, I like both methods, and I've done both with different books that I've written. Crappy to happy, traditional publisher, winds up in the movie Eat, Pray, Love. Never could have predicted that. My next book, Power of Miracle Thinking, I self-published. So here's the difference. And again, like I said, I like both models, and the only thing that I want for each of you is what is highest and best for you. So in terms of self-publishing, I say if you want to get a book out quickly, self-publish. Typically, if you want to make more money per book, self-publish. If you want control over your cover design and every single word in your book, self-publish. If, however, you want national media, you're speaking regionally or nationally, but you want to go larger from wherever you are, definitely try for a traditional publisher. My first-time authors in Oprah Magazine, Cosmo Magazine, Time Magazine, and the doors that open for them because of that, or in airport bookstores, unbelievable. The amount of speaking opportunities that can open up, and you just have no idea what can open up for you. We did a book that we edited, and I secured an agent for, just came out just this past year, like late October, a year ago, and called The Skincare Hoax. The author is Dr. Fane Fry is in very serious talks with PBS for her own national PBS special. On the skincare hoax. You have no idea what doors can open for you or the impact you can make, because sometimes you could just reach so many more people through the distribution of Barnes & Noble and foreign rights. And So but you will often make less money per book, but your money is really in the upsell. I was speaking with an author this morning who said, "Oh my God, the paid speaking I'm getting because my book came out. That's where his money is. If I self-publish my book, it makes it easier for a publisher to offer me a book deal. No, I already covered that earlier on. Unless you've sold a gazillion copies and you still have a lot of people left to sell it to. Literary agents will help me with my publicity. No, they won't. It's not what they do. They negotiate contracts. Like I call myself a book broker. I pitch to both agents or publishers, depending on the project and where I think it's best served. And so agents, they want to take projects primarily to Penguin Random House, Simon and Schuster, where they can get larger deals because that's where they're going to make their most money. But they typically do not help with publicity. I mentioned, I think, two parts of the conversation to get a book deal. I've already spoken a little bit about part one's about your positioning. You must own a lane. It's just critical to the sale of your book. Own a lane. If you can say my book is the first book too, then fill in the blank, you own the lane. And how do you know if your book is the first book too? So this is how you do it. You go on Amazon, you put in some keywords and you see what else is current and out there. So, and actually that's part of what we do in the business plan. There's a section called About the Competition. And we go on Amazon and find the competition that's in your category. That's recent. They're not interested in books even from 2019 or earlier. What's more recent, especially 21, 22, and 2023. Now, there's a second part to get a book deal, and it's entirely about the business side of publishing, which is completely ruled by numbers. So I want to share with you what numbers you would need and what you can do if you don't have the numbers, because I never want to squash anybody's dreams, ever. But you've got to have strong numbers. Why? Publishers are looking not only at the size of your social media, the size of the appearances that you're making on podcasts, whatever, but they're also examining the size of engagement you have with your audience to get book deals. So a mid-range publisher wants to sell 3,500 to 5,000 books in the first year. That's a mid-range publisher. Penguin Random House, Simon & Schuster want to sell 10,000 books in the first year. So where do your numbers need to be to justify them laying out the money to print and publish your book? So what I see, if you're writing anything in the business lane, you need to be on LinkedIn and you need to be strong on LinkedIn. Minimally, and I'm talking bare bones, squeak by minimum, you need 10,000 people on LinkedIn. So wherever your audience is, if you can have 10,000 people in a particular category, minimally speaking, I could pitch a book. I work with a LinkedIn specialist. He's brought my numbers from 2,371 people to 22,400 something people as of right now. I get the majority of my business, truthfully, from LinkedIn. So I refer people to him. If you got a business book, you want your numbers high, you don't have to be the person who's doing it. You can delegate. I have an author who, Tony Roth, wrote, he's writing a trilogy, thriller trilogy. And he had written the first book. We edited it. In fact, my editor for thrillers, if you happen to know anybody working on thriller, Tony Roth, he's a former publisher from Simon & Schuster. Everyone I work with is like, they're at the top. They're at the top of the publishing food chain. And so, he worked on the editing and helped Tony with that first book. And Tony started a podcast to talk about his book series. He got 20,000 downloads in the first 2 weeks. But here's the catch. Tony didn't have a book yet. He had a manuscript still on his laptop. I said, Tony, how'd you do this? You had 20,000 downloads? He said, well, I work with this guy who helped me, a social media guy who helped me do Facebook ads. I said, will you please introduce me to that social media guy? So, it depends where your audience is, what you're looking for. The two women from the Métis tribe who I, sold their Oracle deck, they did a GoFundMe. They pre-sold, a gazillion decks. So whatever it takes to build your numbers, whether you want a referral from me or, you work with someone else, whatever, build your numbers because you have to. So I was sitting with Angelina Jolie's literary agent. I'm pitching a project to him in New York at the Javits Conference Center. And I was just sitting at a Starbucks table at the conference center. And I see him do this. He's like pulling out his phone while I'm talking to him. And I start judging the guy, thinking, God, that's rude. I'm not pitching him. Well, it turns out he was looking up my author on YouTube. And he said, oh, no, the engagement's too small. Who else you got? And I've been on Zoom calls with an acquisitions editor who turned sideways while I'm pitching her. I was pitching 9 projects to her in a row, and she's looking up my people on her big laptop screen, versus the one that, so she's got these double computers going, and she goes, "Oh no, engagement's too small." So how do you know what your engagement is? I'll tell you, because this publisher told me they're going to a website called, and you want to write this down, look yourself up, socialblade.com. It tracks the amount of engagement people have with their audience, and it gives people an ABCD rating. You can go find yourself, check yourself out, not while you're on this call, but afterwards, go check yourself out and see your engagement. Do whatever you can to bring your engagement up. So with Tony, for example, I haven't even shopped his book to a publisher yet. And all of a sudden he has 20,000 downloads and he's getting 4,500 comments and things like this on LinkedIn for his thriller trilogy. And I said, Tony, send me screenshots. So when I was pitching that book, screenshots intact, I had another guy who's very big, a writer on Medium. I said, send me the screenshots as part of your proposal. And sure enough, with Tony, I had a publisher in 3 days saying, oh, yeah, I want this. They hadn't even read the book yet because they knew it was coming from me. They knew that Dan, the publisher from Simon & Schuster, had worked on it, and the guy had the numbers. So that's just a formula for success. But truthfully, I don't want to talk anybody out of your dreams. Everybody has their, what I call divine right connection. So when I'm looking for somebody's publisher, I'm asking for their divine right alignment. I just want truly what is highest and best for each person. That's it. So first book I ever sold, Nice Girls Do Get the Sale. And at the time I'm thinking, girls, we're power women. Do we want to be called girls? But the truth is, Nice was trending at the time. The Power of Nice had come out. And the publisher knew that, their marketing department. And so this book got picked up, Eleanor Stutz, it got picked up in Time magazine. The next thing you know, she's on stage, and Eleanor was basically unknown at the time. Again, we're going back about 20 years. All of a sudden, she's on stage with Susie Orman at Moscone Center in San Francisco, and then she's flown to Paris to speak. Her career absolutely skyrockets, as it has till this day. And this book has come out over 20 years ago. It's been evergreen. Is your work evergreen? Will it be as relevant 20 years from now as it is today? So the publisher actually just recently came back to Eleanor, and they want to refresh some of the material. And this book is out, and they've sold foreign rights in multiple languages. So some years later, after Eleanor's first book comes out, I get an email. I'm just on her email list saying, that she's got this ebook called Hired, How to Use Sales Techniques to Become the Candidate of Choice on a Job Interview. And I looked at that book and went, oh my God, I can sell this. So I called Eleanor and I said, Eleanor, I can sell this book. Would you want to write me a proposal? Because she knew the proposal process. She had already been through it with me with her first book. So she said, sure. So she writes the proposal and sends it to me. And I said, Eleanor, I'm sorry, but this proposal is not going to sell the book. Will you please allow me to rewrite it? And she's like, oh, Randy, I know it's a great proposal. I said, Eleanor, please allow me to rewrite it. And she did. And when I finished with it, she went, oh my God, I get the difference. I secured an agent in 1 day for this book. He sold the book in 1 week to a publisher who then sold it in bulk, 3,000 copies to FedEx offices all over the country here in the US. So yeah, Eleanor sings my praises. So one of the techniques that I was doing for any live pitching was I was putting a double-sided sheet together. This book was Addicted to Perfect, A Journey Out of the Grips of Adderall. And so when I was meeting with people in person, nobody thought to ever do this. I mean, so few people ever have done something like this. I help the authors craft the text. So when I'm in a half an hour meeting and I'm pitching 16 projects, I can go quick. So the first side was always about the project, some bulleted takeaways, a quote from the author or from a testimonial. And the second side was the author's bio and their ability to promote. So I would very quickly get considerations, promises of consideration for when a project was ready. And so this is one of the way over 20 years I built up so many connections. The project didn't even have to be ready. I would get back and I'd have a report, there's like 7 to 10 to 17 publishers or agents interested in each project. And so just, now it's just like I say, my connections now, like, I have one agent who says, Randy, I'm getting 1,000 submissions a month. When you have something for me, text me. That's a real relationship. I have agents, we give each other thumbs up and likes for our warm, fuzzy dog pictures on Facebook. These are real relationships. I have another agent, Linda, the one I mentioned earlier, who's done, 6-figure deals, and she did the skincare hoax book. She said, Randy, I hope I fast track every project you send me. Well, why? Because I've sent her projects that have gotten 6-figure deals. I've had multiple authors get 6-figure deals. So yeah, they often get back to me, and publishers will often get back to me, not only quickly, but sometimes the same day. I mean, it's really amazing. Great Mondays. Like I mentioned, books, it's common for me to get multiple deals, multiple offers on books. This book on company culture, Great Mondays, 4 publishers offered deals on this book. And the author, met with each of the publishers. We did Zoom calls, things like that. And he went with McGraw-Hill. That was a $15,000 advance. Outsiders on the Inside. Titles matter. The original title of this book was Successful Misfits. But I had been speaking with a publisher who said he would never publish a book that puts down the target market audience. So I retitled it Outsiders on the Inside, book deal. And I said, it doesn't explain the dummy series or the Idiot's Guides, go figure, but Power Women, I'm not sure we want to be identified as dummies or idiots. I don't think so. I'm not going there. Kindness in the Scary World. Boy, we could use that book today. So this was part of actually a 3-book deal. And this was a 4th book that the publisher wanted to help children deal with issues around terrorism. So relevant for today. Also award-winning. Youngest author I ever sold a book to a traditional publisher. Shania Fastia, by age 11, had already spoken with 100,000 children in schools. She created an anti-bullying curriculum. Speaking of fearless, when I talked about hiccup of hesitation, no hesitation here. This gal was in gymnasiums, just totally unstoppable. She's like, I think around like 21 or 22 now, and pursuing her Hollywood career, but just like unstoppable. Slave, the hardest book emotionally I ever edited. Slave, a human trafficking survivor finds life, but guess what? Option for Hollywood film now. Children's books, I'm no longer really dealing with them, but there's different requirements for each category. The person who's writing children's books, if you want to follow up with me, we can have a private conversation about that. Red Stocking Society was a middle grade book that I sold, like a pay it forward Christmas story. Lovely, lovely book. Does your book solve a big problem? Like Jennifer Kozak, her son with autism, she put him through all these natural protocols, working with experts, not just, doing this on her own. And she has like over 200,000 people following her because her son with autism started making eye contact, stopped throwing tantrums, initiates conversations with strangers, and actually has friends now. So, very, very powerful if you actually solve a really big problem. Timing in the marketplace, remodel success. I was originally working with this book, and we edited it. It was all ready to go. And I'm in New York, but also the housing crisis hits, in the late 2008, 10 or whatever. We had to wait like, 4 or 5 years or whenever it was until the housing market came back. Then I sold it. And this book, Remodel Success, I actually checked in with the author recently because I sold it a while ago. And she said her book, it ranks ridiculously high on Amazon. She's often like she's been number 1, whatever, on Amazon in the remodeling category, which is really awesome. Red Mittens is a novel. I sold this one in a week. It's a paranormal novel. Mastering Strategic Risk went to Wiley. Finding the Wow. I have to tell you this story. It's the most amazing story. MJ Margraff, the author. So she's a bored housewife in California, in the Bay Area. She and her two girlfriends get together and they form a group called the Chicks in Charge. And they're going to take back the dreams they left behind. MJ is supposed to become a pilot, but she has two big obstacles that are in her way. It's very male dominated industry and she has to learn how to fly a damn plane. So she masters those things with a lot of effort. It's a really fun read. This book is a tremendously fun read. But she doesn't stop there. She becomes a flight instructor. But she doesn't stop there. I swear to you, on the International Space Station, there's a game that she invented with high school students that they've played. And so bored housewife MJ Margraff goes from boredom to featured, full-page feature in Oprah magazine, interviewed on Hallmark TV, and I was actually in New York accepting awards for her at an awards ceremony. So it's amazing, like what can happen, the power of a book that comes out with a traditional publisher. And the book became Finding the Wow, How Dreams Take Flight at Midlife. Now notice the title of this book. I sold it under a very different title that I don't even remember right now. But this book addresses what's in it for me from a reader's perspective. This is a memoir, but it's what's in it for me from the reader's perspective, Finding the Wow, How Dreams Take Flight at Midlife. Fearless Beauty was a self-published book originally by a red carpet makeup artist. I did sell that one. But again, it's, like I said, very, very tough to sell a self-published. It was self-published first. This was fun because on the top shelf is Hired, and on the middle shelf is 30 Days to Social Media Success. So two of my author's books were in FedEx offices around the country at the exact same time, which was really fun. Sold this board game, the tarot game. If your book is attached to a nonprofit, a lot of times publishers like those. I sold a literary fiction this past year related to a story about a young girl with a child with brain cancer. And the publisher who bought this book, and I thought it was going to be a difficult sell, but I got it sold directly to a publisher. And he approached the author and he said that he wanted to also share a portion of royalties with a nonprofit related to childhood brain cancer. And the author got to pick an organization she's attached to for that. And I thought that was really cool. That book will come out, I guess, in 2024. Power of Miracle Thinking, my second book. And I self-published this one. Like I said, my first one winds up in the movie. Crappy to Happy winds up in Eat, Pray, Love in the movie, which is totally cool. And, then I have that credibility of having a book featured in a major, film with Julia Roberts holding it. But I make more money per book, with self-published. So like I said, I like both models for different reasons. Niche books. Wow. I'm in New York 20 years ago thinking, how the heck am I going to sell this? This is so niched. But I found a publisher who specialized in beginner's guides for martial arts books. The author has done different, multiple books because he writes about all these different swords. He's big in the Renaissance fairs. Series books. So Gail Z. Martin is actually one of my editors because Gail has sold over 1 million copies of her fantasy books. She's on fantasy stages everywhere. Now she's actually writing gay male stories, novels, about gay male cowboys and whatever. So, but anyway, she's just a great writer. And so she'd already sold 1 million copies of her fantasy books, but fantasy is a very different lane than a business book on social media. So she wanted to do like a series, 30 Days of Social Media Success to Virtual Productivity Success. And so she already had a great track record of sales, but not in this lane. And so we were only able to get the first book, and because publishers wanted to see how did this book do. It wound up in FedEx office, it wound up in the Office Max stores across the country. It did well, and then they started offering series deals for her. The China Factor, another book sold to Wiley. Choose Your Life was a young adult book that won a Moonbeam Children's Award. Social Media Marketing for Boomers, So when this book came out, that author owned that lane. Gift books, things like that. Finding Heaven Here, I sold in England. And so I'm coming close to the end of my slides here. The way you can support one another is to endorse each other's books, get back cover endorsements. And the way to do it, if you don't have a book that's out, or even maybe you're still working on it, maybe it's on your laptop as a Word document, you would call yourself the author of the upcoming book, such and such. So at least get yourself positioned. You can support one another. And the way that endorsements typically work in the publishing industry, whether you're going after a famous person or a professional that you know, whatever, is that you write them yourself and you ask people to sign off on them. And maybe you send people your introduction and a chapter. Because truthfully, how busy are you in your life? Everybody's busy in their lives. And most people, unless they're a close mentor or a personal friend, they just don't have time. It just really helps people. You write some blurbs, ask people if they'd be willing to sign up on your book or to tweak, an endorsement. So that's typically how it's done. So you can support your authors. And this is really my closing slide here, because this is what I've discovered. A book is either an option or it's a priority. If it's your option, it'll never get done. If it's a priority, you absolutely will make it happen and nothing's going to stop you. Like when I was looking for a publisher for Crappy to Happy, my first book, and I'm in year 4 of searching and, getting close, so close, and then things they fall apart. And again, this is back in the, early, late 90s. This is happening. And I called myself the pit bull of perseverance, because this was my dream. It was my absolute priority, because I knew I was here to make an impact. And so, if it's your priority, you will make it happen. Anytime I got a rejection, I said, you're not the one who's going to make $1 million off of me. Next. The Crappy to Happy wound up becoming a bestseller for my publisher. And so, you stay true to your dream. And if I can help you get there, I'm truly happy to.